Leadership is a beautiful journey, and the one that I think can actually make a difference in the world. It maybe sounds trite, whatever little world you're in or bigger world in your family world. And when it comes from a good place, as a good individual, wanting to put a Lego brick in the world of some happiness and goodness, it is worth investing a lot in learning how to operationalize that into being a good leader. But a good leader is somebody who was, in my view, born like that or grew through it, through hardships, and who, in the end analysis, is happiest when business success is combined with people success and is truly happy about it, not bullshitty happy.
Welcome to 99 Humans. My name is Jeff LaCosta, curious coach and Wall Street Journal best-selling author, striving to understand how little things generate big impact.
And I'm Nadia Carta, tech executive and lifestyle coach with a mission to transform lives and corporations by kindling hearts to generate a zeal for life.
Each week, we investigate stories about the human side of leadership to re-energize your spirit and help you become a stronger leader.
Because the reality is that leadership is messy, goofy, challenging, but always human.
Thanks for spending time with us today. Let's dive in.
I mean, it's like 11 years now.
She was doing Double Click Creative. I was running the zoo. We worked together. And then she spread her ginormous wings and floated to the US.
I love that. I gauged that the two of you are making friendships already. So Jeff, you and Mailine never met each other?
No, which is amazing because we absolutely must have crossed paths both. I mean, I've worked with the zoo, I've worked with Creative Works. So there, for sure, people in your orbit are in my orbit, but I don't think we had ever formally met. So it's awesome to have you here with us on 99 Humans.
Mailine has a lot of stories, isn't it right, Mailine? So the question will be, how many do we want to tell today?
You can do a series.
I love it. Yes, please.
You can do a series, and that you can also do a panel series where women leaders interview other women leaders. I think that's cool.
There's so much to do. And what you don't know, Jeff, is that Mailine's son is now at Google as well.
I just heard
it. By the way, I'm Mailine, just for the
Mailine.
Mailine. I know it's spelled Mailine, but it's Mailine.
Because I pronounce it the French way.
Yeah, I never correct anyone. So nobody knows, actually.
Mailine, what's your son doing at Google?
APMM.
Okay.
So he's slugging through the noogling period with great perseverance and motivation and enormous noogler anxiety. And I'm going, it's normal. You overwhelm.
It's overwhelming.
Like you go in the workforce, you just start in the workforce. He goes, what is global, regional, and local doing? I'm like, dude.
I was asking that question 13 years in, so that's a fair question.
He's like, how am I going to explain that? So it's funny.
I like the serendipitousness between the two of you, but mostly I'm wondering, what are you up to these days? What's going on in the West Coast? I know you have family there, your brother.
Yes, so I'm here for my father, actually, which is a bit of, I told Jeff, it's a bit of a solemn moment. And then I'm going to San Francisco where I have meetings, and I have my two brothers there. So I'm going to spend time with my brothers, my nieces, nephews, etc. I do this often.
I love that. Are you stopping by to have dinner with me in New York?
I'm going to do that next time, because I'm obviously going to be there at some point in the next 6 to 8 months. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, if you ever make it to Atlanta, would love to see you here as well.
I used to for Coca-Cola.
Yes.
I used to
Depot, Delta. There's a couple, there's a bunch of good reasons to be here.
No, I was doing Coca-Cola pitches, and I was in hotels, like rehearsing pitches for global Coca-Cola Atlanta things.
That's
I
awesome.
remember that.
And Mailine is a wonderful stage tiger. So I can only imagine those speeches, how you were rocking them.
Yeah, we did win that one. And the people that I had with me ended up marrying afterwards on the pitch. So, so they're still married. They live in New York, and that was they married right like they met on the pitch and they married after. So don't ask any more questions. We were there
Wow.
for a week.
I think that's a good jumping off point, actually, because, 99 Humans is all about talking to incredible people such as yourself and getting a little bit of a peek behind the curtain. You have spent many years leading big global teams at Google. You've been in the advertising industry, at agencies and consultancies, and being a woman leader, as you said, in this industry, you certainly have a lot of stories to share. And that's maybe where I'd love to start is it's interesting to see the human side. People getting married at a pitch. It's a great example, right? You win the business, everyone gets a resume bullet, you get revenue, that's the impact. But in the meantime, the much bigger story for those folks was meeting the love of their life and building a life. I mean, holy cow. So I'd love to hear a time when leadership for you on this journey has been particularly human. When was it more than a resume bullet? Hard, sad, funny, goofy?
Well, it's always like that for me. So in leadership, I look at the objectives and the things and the vision we want to achieve for the business. But I also really incorporate the human side. So I've always worked in creative businesses, and I've worked with people who are, creative individuals, emotional individuals who make art, who write stories, who, for whom the profession, in a sense, is linked to their emotions. So for me, I've never been really able to totally dissociate the two. And probably the moments where I've been most excited and happy in my career were the moments where they were able to achieve incredible things in our team with what we did, things that they didn't think were possible. And they still talk about that to this day. And that through that, they forged relationships that will last their lifetime with their colleagues, moving beyond colleagues to friends. About 6 or 7 weeks ago, they organized a spontaneous meetup in Paris between people who flew in from Doha, who flew in from Lisbon. We used to all be on the same team. And it was like people were bound together by this experience, but through the experience also as humans. Mm. And I have been, very fortunate to celebrate a number of unions, even in Google, out my team. That's where, yes. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting observation and reflection that you're making, Mailine, in a time where companies, we used to call them families, but I don't think it's appropriate anymore. And there's so much going on social media around companies are not your family. Like companies have different priorities. But it seems to me that there was a time where this was true and it has evolved. And I want to ask you this question because I don't know if we read it wrong. Like we thought that this was true and it was never true. And we were just sugar coated or drunk by all the honey that we were drinking. You know what I mean? Like how things have evolved and changed. And so I'm wondering what your reflection is being, given that you've been in the workforce and you've seen it in many flavors.
I understand the feeling that people have of thinking that companies are families. because there's a lot of storytelling in companies, right? And the best companies and the best leaders are also, in my view, the best storytellers. Are stories true? So I leave you with this for the moment. So I haven't spent, my entire career in Google. I was, long time out of Google. I was also in very tough environments, very tough, exactly the opposite of Google, basically. We grew our own business in a very tough economic time in the boom and bust. And I've never believed that companies were families, because our companies are for profit, the companies we work in. And for profit means that money goes, money is important, revenue is important. These are quoted companies. And decisions have to be made, tough decisions for the stock market and for the shareholders, and for, I think in this case, survival of businesses, because of what we're witnessing at the moment. So where I think a family comes in is that it comes in through the people, the individual, and then in the people also the collective. Like you can't, you have to go with, if you choose to work in a company that's a big stock quoted company, you have to take that in stride. You have to be very lucid about where you work, but you're with the people. And the people can be a family, quote unquote, that holds on to each other in hard times and in great times. I mean, the Xugler movement, if I take Xugler as an example, like they started the Xugler movement. It's, because there's so many Xuglers right now, it's become very vibrant. Old Googlers like Jim Lesinski and Eileen Knott, and they actually come into the Xuglers to speak. There's venture capital in the Xuglers, and through the tough times that we've been going so far, I've seen the most tremendous outreaches, like of people helping people. Yes, you were a reorganization victim, or yes, you were, but the people that are still in Google, or maybe the people that are out, that reach out and say, can I help? So it's awesome. And I think that this is where you know that you're working in a stock quoted company, but the people that company has attracted so far are people that really make a difference, whether they're in or out of the company. So this is what I focus on.
I think this is a really interesting question, because it feels to me like people are figuring out what their views are on this topic, right? Everybody in the workforce, everybody at a company is trying to understand what should they think. And in my experience, just to maybe paint the polarity, you have folks who are really pessimistic, right? They understand it's a stock market company, and they almost radiate, I'd say, a negativity about that reality. And it almost becomes a selfish pursuit of what can this company do for me? I don't care about them dime a dozen, which I hear echoes of that in what you're saying. And then you have folks on the other side who are blindsided by any profit-driven decision, who feel betrayed by decisions that might not be best for their personal situation. And I'm wondering, maybe through this lens, your son is starting at a big company like this. It's Google, but it could be any other public big company. What advice do you have for him on how to balance this spectrum and to have a healthy relationship to a corporation?
What I tell him is the balloon. So I described the balloon. I said, there's a balloon. And when you jump into that balloon, you have more stuff than you would ever have in your lifetime at your age, because he's barely 22. I'm like, all this is not normal. So this and this and this and this and this is not the normal world. And he's an entrepreneurial guy. And if I say, if you want to be an entrepreneurial guy, focus on your work, yourself, the development, your people and relationship skills, and stay independent from the perks and the money. Because you take people with you, like I take Nadia with me, and now meet you. And you take experience with you and beauty of things that you can always see everywhere. But it's extremely important to come in as an independent mind and remain that way. A company is not a family. This is what I told him.
I mean, this is all easier said than done when you are in an environment where there's a lot of cocooning and there's a lot of quote unquote taking care of you with services and perks, like you said, and benefits. And one way that I am evolving the views on this is the systemic view, right? Which means eventually corporations are systems. And you, like, the choice that we have is, do we invest in making the system a better place for everybody, but knowing that in the structure of the system, what matters is also what makes the system. Like, you are not the system. And it's very easy to confuse yourself with the system. And I really like what you said about focusing on you, what you want to learn, what you want to develop. And I mean, Jeff knows that I speak a lot about this. It all goes back, in my opinion, to who you are, who you want to be, and where you want to go, and how the system can be in service of you.
And also in service of the system. I mean, I don't say that we should not be in service of system. I think when you sign with a company, and in the case of Google, this particular company, and, you know, for me, the rewards that you get from signing with Google are sort of massive. I work in the system. I deal with the system. I try to make the system a better place. But I know that the system is a for-profit quoted system, and this system is trying to survive and grow profits. And if this system has to make harsh decisions to survive and grow profits, the system will do that. And at that moment, that system is not focused on people first, it is focused on profit first. And you might also argue that in a sense it's for the people, because that's how they can continue to survive and pay, 100,000 something people that are still there. So it's almost like you have to take abstraction of the individual, that you are in a role that for the company doesn't matter. When the company makes decisions like that, you're an individual, you're in a role, okay, there's a spreadsheet, bang, right? But the company does that to, in this case scenario, in my view, to survive. I mean, if you understand the underlying dynamics in our industry, I understand why they're doing it. The question is how. And I think on the how, when people have contributed to the system, to the company, when there's a strong culture of being together, of groups, of teams, how you go through that process with your people is something that I think can be really optimized. It's like, some companies are just not good at doing it, and other companies are excellent at doing it. They're almost like the companies that I take as an example are companies where even if people get made redundant, they still feel valued, and they fall into a very well orchestrated alumni network in which the companies pour a lot of money, and they are supported through this alumni network, almost as powerful as when they were still in the company.
I never thought about that in that way, actually.
I mean, there are companies that are just awesome at that, and you're thanked for your service, and your contribution is celebrated at an individual level and also at a team level. That's a skill. And there are companies that are doing it. And I know companies in the industry, outstanding.
Yeah. I think Procter had something like that, no?
Procter, McKinsey, BCG, all the consulting firms. I think Unilever, all the people that left Unilever, it's a company that puts really people at the center. It's going through tough times, and it has to make a lot of, serious decisions, as you probably read from the press. But the alumni that I know, even the ones that, got lost in the org changes, appreciate the company and what the company has done for them, post their departure from the company, because you're never really out of that company. You move straight in the alumni network.
You sound incredibly wise, experienced, sharing things that take that experience to have that view. And I guess we're all the wisest versions of ourselves today, and will be so tomorrow too. But you baited us a little earlier with this question of, are stories true? And I'd love to wind the clock back a little bit and maybe hear a time where you felt like a story was not true.
The times when my own stories weren't true.
What do you mean?
So in the beginning of my career as a manager and as a leader, I'm in the storytelling space. And when I had to tell, a challenging story, mostly, like if they're good stories, it's really, the story is generally quite, I'm fine with the story. It's great. If the story is challenging, I have to chisel the story in order to change the wording, make it, positive and forward looking, while people feel like shit. And at some point, and I learned this from, I've had some amazing managers, a couple at Google. I learned this from one manager. So he wrote scripts for himself. And then every time he did sort of a speaking engagement like that internally, and then he poured his whole gut into that. This was before we had ChatGPT and Gemini to then help us sanitize it. And then he would share it with me, actually, and he would say, can you help me look at this? So this comes from my heart. Can you help me look at it and modulate it a little bit, to make it spreadable? And I said, wow, do you really want to go there? And he said, yes, because that's how I have to acknowledge that people don't feel good. And this is the company story where everybody is reorganized for better, good, blah, blah, blue, but nobody addresses that people really don't want this reorg and that they're incredibly scared. So I'm going to meet them where they are. And I'm like, whoa. And then the next time when something like that happened, I did it. So I started writing the thing and saying, this is a challenging situation. You must now all, or most of you, some are early adopters, some are, rebels, and change is hard. It depends. Every person is different. Every person has a part of this journey, but it's hard. And we can acknowledge this is hard. And we can acknowledge you might not like this, and you might not like this, and you might be scared, and so on. And probably everybody deep in their heart, especially me, I'm scared. I'm your leader, but right now I'm waking up every morning going, whoa, this is a tough one. And then I come into the office and I'm seeing all of you and I'm with you guys. And then I'm going, okay, there's a reason to make this work together.
Yeah.
So let's not hide behind the curtain here. We're in a safe place. And we can say occasionally that things suck. And then we move on. So
that realness, it sounded like you even, when your boss, before you had done this yourself, shared, you felt a little resistant, like, whoa, do you really want to go there? And I want, like, where does that come from? Now that you've seen, it really works.
It was tapping into what makes us human. And people are not idiots. So when things are fake and when things are real, unless people are tremendously good actors, but then even you see that. So I think if you have a realness to your style, for better or for worse, and a lucidity about what you say, and a vision, is better for people and better for leadership.
So I have a dilemma. We actually had another guest a while ago on this podcast that was of the philosophy that you don't share with people what can't help them, and you shield them from, let's say, issues or problems that they can't have an impact on and they're just bothering them. And I actually had this very conversation this week with someone in the office, because I said, okay, what is the leadership that is needed, right? On one side, you have leaders that are extremely raw and crude and they share how are things. And then you have leaders that are more sugar coated. And this applies also to parenting, by the way, because it's also with children. Like, what do you tell your kids? But I mean, this is a genuine question I'm asking, because on one side, you might be generating anxieties for no reason, right? Like, oh, I'm unfolding and unveiling. And some people process things differently because they don't have the context that many others have. And sometimes by leaders sharing things very openly, they turbocharge this anxiety, because maybe these other people start spiraling. They're like, oh my God, what does that mean for me? Oh my God, what is the next thing that's going to happen? All of it. Whereas maybe they're just sharing because they're sharing, and nothing is going to happen. So what is the balance in your experience?
For me, there is a balance to strike with it, which is a challenging one. And that's also where storytelling comes in. So I would not go in raw. Like, I would not go in, okay, this sucks and now, figure it out. That's not what I would say. What I would say is, this is not a simple situation. I feel it, you feel it. So I put myself and my own emotion in the mix. But then I bring them to a place where they acknowledge their emotion and then move on. When I do reorgs, for instance, and I do focus groups for reorgs, I have people vent. I mean, it's a safe space. Everything is open. But once they're off the train with the venting, we move on. So repressing things in a system and sugarcoating things in a system will make an unhealthy system. And this is what so like, moaning and groaning is not going to help anybody, but that's not what I'm, and the reality of, we had this a couple of years ago or even last year with Google, where people were angry, where they go, it's sugar coated. I mean, just be real, tell us the way it is, because this doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel real. Smart people feel that. So they have started to take that feedback on board. And now we're, learning about the economic situation. We're learning about the investment needed. We're learning about the geopolitical uncertainties. And we're learning what the leadership faces when they're working through it. And we see somebody on a call last year, 2 years ago, or in January, when we had the first mass layoffs, a leader actually crying, like holding back her tears, one of the top leader on a call, on the all hands to the entire company. And the feedback, you saw that, you saw the emotion, and then she reshuffled it. But the feedback after that call from everybody that I spoke to in the region of EMEA, I don't know about the US, was there's at least one person who cares. And probably that slip of the it goes too far, you see the person, that slip was worth more than any other lead on that particular topic, than any other leader call there was. That's what people were talking about. Isn't that interesting?
Let me press for a minute, though, because I feel like a challenge that people who aren't the ultimate leader, which is almost all of us, right? You know, if you're not the CEO, then you're a middle manager, if like sort of phrase. And a piece of the human experience that feels key in what you're describing is also providing the vision. Also, you know, sit in the space, emotions, vent, but paint a picture of the future, move on, go forward. Yes, exactly. Okay. But thus in lies the challenge. What if you don't know what that is? Because in this sort of middle management layer, actually quite often, there isn't yet a clear picture of the future, and yet the change has started. We're going, you know, we're on the change curve. We just don't know where we're going yet. What tips or things have you seen work or not work there, where I think to Nadia's point, it's like, do I create anxiety by starting this change curve without the ability to paint a forward picture? Or do I just hold on? You know, does it feel fake to go, let's sit in our emotions without ever being able to move on from them? Or is it fake to refuse to go to the emotional place? And I think a lot of leaders feel that challenge. Now, my own opinion might be that maybe we're giving away too much of our own agency, that we probably can paint a little bit of a forward picture, but not always. So I'm curious for your advice here on what leaders should do when that really critical piece might be missing for them.
Go back to the entrepreneurial vibe. When you start a business, you have no idea where you're going to end up, if it's going to fail, if it's going to go, but you have an idea of something. And if you're in the middle management boat, the small like the moving forward is flexibility, agility, togetherness, testing, learning, iterating, and trying things, which is how even, you know, Google started. So it's almost like getting back to a mindset as a team with each other, where it is like Lego blocks. Like you don't know really if you're going to build what kind of castle you're going to build unless you have a pattern. But let's say you do free Lego, right? And you don't really know how to yet put the pieces. You have no instructions, but there is some sort of joy and beauty in putting the pieces together day by day and seeing what is buildable. So I move on a very short-term basis in that building mentality. And you know, you vent, you do, and then you build. Like you never stop building, whatever the situation. You pivot, you build, and you do it together. There's always something to build. Like I'm profoundly convinced that if you look around, whatever situation you're in, there's always a little brick to lay. And on that, probably many others. And it's what you're doing right now on this call.
I love that. That's a full circle. You know, we started talking about big companies, entrepreneurial, how those things mix. And here it is coming up in some of the hardest of times as human leaders, being something to return back to.
Well, it's almost like that thing, Rome wasn't built in a day, but someone was putting that brick every day, and eventually it all came together. And when we look at Rome, the end result of Rome is pretty overwhelming. But then when you focus on the small next step that you can take, then it gets more manageable. I mean, Jeff, you're a writer. When you focus on the next word or the next line and the next magic, then it brings home. But I don't want to underestimate that it's really hard, because only this week I had 4 people coming at me and they told me, Nadia, I know the bigger picture, but it's really hard for me to focus on the small next step. And so I know we are about to end, but one last question that I have, and I don't want to open a can of worms, but then I'm like, how? Like, how to focus on only that next brick, how to focus only on the next step without losing sight of the bigger picture?
Saying to your team, I feel there is a bigger picture. I could be wrong, but the bigger picture, what do you think? It might be this, it might be this, it might be this. We're in a changing time. And there are various ways of looking at this bigger picture. This bigger picture is a move forward picture, and it's maybe we could talk together about what you think about it and what I think about it, and we could sort of, paint it together. And in that, you're here because you're a flexible person and you're an adaptable person and you're a very creative person. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been here at all, right? So within that framework, which is uncertain, but if you didn't know how to manage uncertainty, you wouldn't work here. Yeah. And you wouldn't work in this industry. And how can you not focus on the uncertainty then within this framework, but focus on week by week steps that we can control, that give us a sense of accomplishment and especially a sense of pride and togetherness within our team and as a team. Yeah. Because nobody's alone in this game if you're like that. If you're, you can build the we're together vibe in this. And we do not let each other down when the going gets tough. There can be a kind of an underlying trust that you can also build as a leader in this, and that you have their back. You don't have the magic wand, and maybe tomorrow, something happens, but just the feeling that they have a human behind them, listening and having their back, is what I call the holding pattern in leadership. And it's you provide a holding pattern, and they are in your holding pattern, and things like buffers up and so on. You need help to keep that holding pattern for yourself, from others, but there's an energy and a giving in that holding pattern that for me is one of the most beautiful things of leadership.
It's wonderfully counterintuitive, in my opinion. Like, in these times of change, when it's hardest to be a leader, I feel the draw to try and get all the answers, practice my speech, confidence, and the holding pattern of asking questions like, what are your ideas? Here's what I think. There's multiple points of view. None of them are correct. None of them are all wrong. Let's talk about this, is a way more human approach than standing up in a spotlight with all the answers.
Oh, no. Very vulnerable. Like when you're in situations like that as a leader, you come from a place of vulnerability yourself. Mm-hmm. You're also a human in this. And this is what, in the end analysis makes true teams. And it's what makes true leaders. The best, leader that I've had in Google, when it all boils down to that, when I thought, why was he my best manager? Because he really cared. He didn't bullshit, and he really cared. Those are the only two things. He really cared.
I love it. Well, Mailine, this has been an amazing conversation. We always end with guests asking the same question, which is, when you reflect on this conversation, what advice would you leave with our listeners?
Leadership is a beautiful journey, and the one that I think can actually make a difference in the world. It maybe sounds trite, but whatever little world you're in or bigger world in your family world, and when it comes from a good place, as a good individual, wanting to put a Lego brick in the world of some happiness and goodness, it is worth investing a lot in learning how to operationalize that into being a good leader. But a good leader is somebody who was, in my view, born like that or grew through it, through hardships, through, and who, in the end analysis, is happiest when business success is combined with people's success and is truly happy about it, not bullshitty happy. Does that make sense?
Well, I do love the bullshitty happy versus the truly happy. We could do a whole podcast about that, I would say.
Here you have a lot of ideas, a new podcast,
Yeah.
Jeff is like, who is this woman? But yeah,
Oh, no, I love it.
I'm
That's
noted
great.
for my sometimes colorful language. Yes.
Mailine, where can people find you if they want to connect with you, talk to you, engage with you?
Well, the people that know me have me on WhatsApp, which is generally good because if I travel a lot, it's the best way to communicate.
Well, that's amazing. We certainly wish you all the best in your journey. We know that you are off to do great things, whatever they might be, and we will follow you in these adventures.
Thank you, Mailine. It's great to meet you.
Bye, bye, bye. Aww.
What a great conversation. Fun to reconnect for you, and a wonderful new person who I've definitely brushed shoulders with, but a great leader who shared some real nuggets here. So I'm wondering, Nadia, what are you taking out of that conversation?
I would say really this concept about focus on the next break. I really liked it. Both you and I are always on to do big things.
Yeah.
I would say. And sometimes it can feel extremely daunting for ambitious people. It can be very overwhelming and very frustrating because it takes time to land progress. It really does take time. I mean, I still remember when you and I were thinking, oh my God, we're going to do 99. And we're like, what? Do we have zero? We're like, okay, let's just focus on the next one. And really, this reminder, like I constantly remind myself when I get overwhelmed, when I get distracted, when I get anxious, like really pausing and asking, what is a small next step that I can take to continue moving? Now, mind you, I also want to acknowledge that it's very difficult, especially when you're in a situation where you're looking for a job and there's so many people like that. I mean, I know so many, and you interview and you're trying to find a job and you don't find it. Like it's really, really hard. And so, nonetheless, in this situation, really focusing what is the next small thing that you can do to keep moving? Because the worst that can happen is that you get stuck.
Yeah.
So this is my takeaway. What about you, Jeff?
I love that. I think the brick by brick, it makes me think of, and folks may have heard this before, but there's that story of walking up to two bricklayers and you go, what are you doing? And one person says, well, I'm laying a brick. And then you go to the second person and say, what are you doing? And they say, I'm building a cathedral. And it points to that idea of step by step by step with a vision in mind is really a secret sauce. And so I love that. But I'll point to a different part of the conversation as a main takeaway, in even a different way than we talked about during the episode. But I like the balloon analogy for hopping into a company. I think, hey, you're jumping into a balloon. This is not normal, is what she said. And there's this structure, and there are these supportive groups, and there's this wild bubble of smart people all around. This is not normal. And now, especially leaving Google, the way that I think of that is, okay, how do I make myself a new bubble? What are the things that when big companies examine what people need to thrive, they need learning and development opportunities. They need lunches with human beings and interaction. They need brainstorming time. They need goals. They need metrics. All right, now that that's not created for me, and that is not normal, but it seems like a high performing environment. How might I mirror something like that without it being created for me to create my own high performing environment? Is kind of where my mind is going, because of where I am just with my own life too. So it was good timing for that.
Oh, I really love that. And obviously, we're all looking forward to hear all the things you're pouring, Jeff.
Oh yes, more. Both of us up to cool things.
Amazing. Well, everybody, thank you for listening as every week. Give us 5 stars if you liked it, because you really help us in gaining more views and more listens. And we are charting through the end of our 99 humans, still, let's say 20 episodes or so. And so we hope that you will continue to follow us and our adventures and all that is coming about our humans. So thank you for your love.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.